Well, good evening, you. Good evening, Asia. Good evening, CTO. Good evening, Vietnam. Good morning, southwestern United States and western United States. And Mando might be in transit. I'm not sure, but we're going to make this happen anyway. How is everybody?
Fantastic. I'm excited. I missed last Monday. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, people missed you too.
We missed you.
Glad to be back. So Bitcoin went through a bumpy period last week. There was like 5 big kicks in the teeth, as I call them, everything from job reports to no rate cuts to fear about submarines in Russia and everything else. It was just an ugly week. And a lot of people thought, again, maybe that was the top of the market. CTO, was that just a blip? Was that just some manipulation or sell pressure? Or what was your take last week? I know you've been traveling and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, I have some charts as usual. Should we jump right into them?
Let's
because
jump in.
I want to show 3 perspectives on this. To short answer to your question, I don't think it's over. It's nothing in the charts today that kind of signal that, at least. So I want to show 3 perspectives. This is the multi-year perspective from 2021, inverse head and shoulders. And if you have been here for some time, you know that's a bullish pattern. And what happened a couple of months ago in April was a retest. You see here, it tested it again, bounced off. So this is the multi-year perspective. Now let's move on and look at 2025. Then if we zoom in, you see another inverse head and shoulders here. So let's zoom in a little bit so you see it better. Here is left shoulder, head, right shoulder. And what happened now this week, or last Saturday, this Saturday, is that we also had a retest. See here, it kind of retraced to the neckline, and at least based on the past 2 days, it has bounced back above the neckline. So here's the medium-term perspective, also a retest. Now let's zoom in further and look at the spring and summer. And as you recall, we had this consolidation period in May and June. Remember, there was this flag, it broke out and so on. And what happened now? We had a retest of the high of that consolidation period, which was actually here in May already, which had a high of, I think it was 112,000. And what happened here? We got a low of 112,000. And the next day, I think it was 111,903. So basically, on the dollar, we retested the high of the previous consolidation these couple of days. So when looking at it like this, we have retest basically on 3 different time frames. So at least as of right now, when recording this does not signal that anything is over. There is no top pattern here. And quite the opposite, it's perfect retest. I've opened new longs here. So that's my bet. Of course, tomorrow or later today, the situation could completely change. And then we reassess the situation. But right now, this is retest. I have opened new longs. That's my summary.
Awesome. Marty, what do you take from all of that? Are we dead? Are we going higher?
I think Bitcoin follows global liquidity since the beginning of 2024. If you looked at the global liquidity lagged 84 days, 12 weeks. We followed the move exactly. Global liquidity did this exact pull down. And if you look at Bitcoin, it pulled back exactly 50% of the move from June. So in my opinion, it's all high time frame. Bitcoin follows global liquidity. Low time frame, Bitcoin is manipulated by the perpetual exchanges to flush long traders. So we predicted this pullback to 50%. I think you get in here now long. I think we're going up. Back up to the
and the alts did get hammered quite a bit too. And there's a lot of questions later about manipulation. We'll get into that, but I want to talk about big picture about some of the stuff that's happening with Bitcoin. We'll touch on some treasuries. We'll touch on some losses and dangers of self-custody, a little bit about central bank digital currencies, new treasuries. I mean, treasuries are popping up in every country. I used to say it was like 1 every 2 days. Then it became 1 every day. Now there's like 5 a day. It's out of control. But let's get into this story. Mando, again, I don't know where he is. He might be traveling. It's summertime, of course. But this is one chart I do want to talk to for a second. There used to be a time when 10 Bitcoin was, one whole coin is an aspirational goal. But then everybody thinks, oh, well, what about 10? What's the possibility of getting to 10? Shout out to Sanjay as well, who got this to me. Basically, it shows you how it gets harder and harder every year to get to 10 Bitcoin. So in 2013, you could reach 10 Bitcoin in like 5 to 10 years with $200 a week. And then in 2020, it took about $880 a month to hit the same goal in 5 years. But in 2025, if you're dropping 4,000 a month, it would take 50 years to get to 10 Bitcoin.
50 years? I don't know about 50 years.
So again, from to get 2013, 200 a week, which is 800 a month. Then 800 a month again in 2020 would take 5 years, and then 4,000 a month would take 50 years to get to 10 Bitcoin. Do you think, Marty, for you first, is getting to 10 Bitcoin now an impossibility for people who are new to the space?
Yeah, I think getting to 10 Bitcoin is hard for a treasury company at this point. There's not a lot of Bitcoin available. It's got to come out of the woodwork, out of these old Satoshi era wallets. No one's selling. In my opinion, no one's selling. I watch the blockchain constantly for all large transactions, and not only is nobody selling, nobody moving, but the market maker is also not manipulating Bitcoin anymore. Bitcoin is taken off. It's no longer requires market making. I believe it's on its way, guys. There's a supply shock incoming. It's already happening.
So why is the price not going up, Marty?
I mean, the price is manipulated, guys. Crypto prices are manipulated until they're not. It's suppressed for accumulation. It's like a beach ball being held under the water. At some point, it'll pop out of the water and it'll do a markup, just like we did previously, and marked up to 100,000 and to 120. It's going to mark up next to 140, in my opinion, and catch everyone out of the trade. We suppressed right here at this level. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I can tell you exactly who's suppressing it, how they're suppressing it. And they're losing control of Bitcoin a little bit. I always say it's Wall Street versus Binance. I think the Wall Street market makers have taken over. They've got most of the liquidity. The US now holds majority of, I think 40% of the supply is being held by Wall Street. And so with their market makers, they're suppressing the price at around this level. I believe the next move up they'll take it to is 125. The altcoins, however, are less manipulated. Remember, there's only 4 crypto assets that are regulated on the CME in the US: Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, and XRP. Binance still has control over Solana. They're the number 1 validator. They still have control over other smaller alts like Sui. They're the number 1 validator. They've now got control over Hyperliquid because they're listed in the US. And once they get control over it, they manipulate it to fit their casino. So they're liquidating longs, high leverage longs, and making money. It's a business model. And until they can't, they'll be doing that. So in my opinion, Bitcoin and Ethereum they've reduced their dominance because of Wall Street, because the minute they become an ETF, the liquidity goes up, the buyers become more treasury companies and long-term holders, less ability for Binance to manipulate. So they move on to the altcoins. And that's just basically on-chain evidence. I can watch them sending large transactions. I mean, guys, over the weekend, I did a tally. Binance sent hundreds of thousands of Solana to Wintermute, their number 1 market maker, and thousands of Ethereum. Now, if you look at their proof of reserves, it shows 0. They don't have any. So It's a big question, and I'm not the only one. We've got the OKX partner, one of the board members, also asking the same question. So there is some shenanigans going on. I think Binance is losing their supremacy, and they're panicking a little bit. Definitely with regulation coming, they're going to be surveilled. So it's an interesting time. I think the beach ball is going to pop out of the water, in my opinion.
So basically, Bitcoin is manipulated less, but crypto is still being hardcore manipulated because they see the window closing before somebody comes down hard on them. CTO, can people still get to 10 Bitcoin if they're starting now?
Yeah, of course, it's a lot of money today. It's like it's $1 million in today's price and monetary value. So, of course, and I mean, probably the price will go up over time. At least it has so far. So, it might be harder and harder. I think need to if setting that as a target, need to combine strategies. Maybe can't just work and save, right, as a salary. Maybe need to start a company on the side, need to learn trading, need to do multiple things to reach that target today, because it might be harder and harder. Like if we're sitting here doing this in 5 years, prices are maybe even higher even in constant purchase power value. So yeah, I think you need to really develop a strategy, and at least my conclusion is that the best combination is to learn trading and also doing some entrepreneurial work. That's the only way to do something that scales. You can, unless you're a handful of AI researchers today, it's very difficult to make a lot of money or make enough money for 10 BTC by salary alone. So that's my take, but I think it's possible, definitely. I think you're muted, James.
Yeah, sorry.
But we saw Mando pop
He
in.
did.
And,
Mando had an emergency, but he's here and he's on his way. So Mando's coming.
Guys, if you want 10 Bitcoin, you better do it fast, because I believe it's going to 125,000 within 10 days. So, and it's not coming down. In my opinion, it won't come down till the top of the business cycle, and that'll be Q2, Q3, 2026. Once we're in the middle of quantitative easing. And then I think the pullback will come, probably from 160 down to back to 125. I think 125 will be our new floor. So this to me is still discounted under 125. That's my opinion. And we'll see then. We'll be doing the show and we'll update. Is Mando here?
Yeah, Mando's here. Thank you, Mando. And sorry about your little emergency. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, before I forget, links below. We're streaming this on all our different channels, but on my channel, you'll see the links below for all these gentlemen, in case you don't know them, but that's highly unlikely at this stage. Mando, thank you for joining. Happy Monday. Sorry about your little kerfuffle before. We were talking, we're going through a couple of topics all at the same time. One of them is, it was a very interesting chart of how long it takes to get to 10 Bitcoin. Like in 2013, you could get to 10 Bitcoin by DCAing $200 a week in 10 years. In 2020, you'd have to DCA, between 800, 900, and 4,000 a month to get there in 5 years. And now in 2025, you have to DCA 4,000 a month, and it would take 50 years. And it's another perspective of how long it takes to build a bag. But the question for the team here was, do you believe 10 Bitcoin is now unattainable for those people that are new to Bitcoin?
Feels like it, if I'm honest. Feels like you have to have earned some money to just rather than just DCAing. It's going to take a long, long time, and I think Bitcoin by 2030 could be above $1 million. So yeah, and if you're it's not really any other currency that's really catching up with that. So unless you're like heavily invested in other parabolic investments things like AI potentially, I think it's going to be tough to catch up with that.
And then you
buy as much as you can.
Yeah, and CTO is I like CTO's angle is, don't depend on your wage slave, but think about something entrepreneurial on the side to get to that $1 million level. But again, as Marty says, we could be 125K in 10 days. Hold you to that, Marty, by the way.
Okay.
But no, I'm kidding. But let's talk about some other news. Since considering Mando's here, this is somebody from your former neck of the woods, James Howell. He threw away $1 billion on a hard drive by accident into a landfill. I don't know what part of the UK this is, but he spent Wales. He spent 10 years. Obviously, he was mining Bitcoin, had a lot, threw away his hard drive by accident, and spent 10 years either trying to find it in the landfill or get a lawsuit so he could dig up the landfill and search it. But I think it's like finding a dust particle in a desert storm. It's beyond a needle in a haystack. But he had basically just gave up. And, I spent one of the things that fascinated me in 2017 about Bitcoin was how much was lost and how scarce it is. So I started accumulating a list of all the people who lost their Bitcoin, like this guy and many others. And when you add all that up, it's 5 million Bitcoin is probably lost that we'll never see again, which includes the 1.04 million in Satoshi's wallet, which is Marty's t-shirt. But Any thoughts on this, guys? The danger, again, we always talk about the danger of self-custody, and you're being responsible. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and we're talking about 10 Bitcoin as well. And it's like having $1 million stored in your closet. Would you store $1 million of cash in your closet at your house? The answer is no way. But people do with the key on Bitcoin. Mando, what do you say for your country?
Yeah, so for this exact scenario, I mean, at the Bitcoin conference, he was saying that he was raising money alongside hedge funds to buy the landfill site. So clearly that fell through. It seems like the sort of thing where he said, I'm done. But like in 5 years' time, when this is worth 10 billion, he'll be like, oh God, maybe I'll reopen the search. He basically needs to raise money to buy the landfill. I think it's off like Swansea Council or Aberystwyth. It's some second city in Wales. And who knows, maybe he'll be back for it. But yeah, I think within crypto, this mantra is always self-custody, but I do think that there are errors to so many ways of doing custody. Like if you're on an exchange, if you have exchange risk, if you have it yourself, there's various different ways you can do it. But you can have like he had obviously like more of a cold storage method, but then lost whatever device he was using. And then now you have the ETFs. And I do think a lot of money will move to the ETFs here because people will view them as a safer way to own Bitcoin.
Yeah, this was actually a hard drive that back in the day, used to be able to slot a hard drive in and out of a laptop. That's exactly what he's holding there. It's exactly the size of the device. And it's crazy. And he's a technologist and a Bitcoin miner. So sometimes people think, if an amateur gets into self-custody, if they screw up, it's kind of expected. But when a professional does it, it kind of gives you a bit of a shock. CTO, what do you think about this professional losing $1 billion?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty difficult to do self-custody because you have to cover for many different ways. You have to make sure that you can recover it. So you need to have many backups. At the same time, you need to cover for the fact that someone could, break into your home. Or the cleaning lady, knows what you're doing, so she's trying to find the backup with the seed phrases. Then you have to cover for that. Then you have to cover for the fact that there could be like a violent attack. Someone breaks into your home intentionally to get it from you. Then you need to cover for that, and you need to cover for all these different scenarios at the same time, and they are kind of a little bit in conflict. And it is possible to do, but I have talked to a lot of people in my community, and most people are not covered. And you also have to cover for if you have children, for example. Maybe you want to cover for your own death, right? Yep. You don't want to lose it like this guy. So it's pretty difficult to do this, and most people are not doing it in a way that covers for all these things. So sadly, I think people will probably keep losing their Bitcoin. I think. That's my conclusion. It is possible to do. I'm just saying that most people don't have the attention to detail required to actually do it right and cover for all these threats.
I always give the analogy of, I remember the banks in the Wild West. In 1850, they were the only strong, made of concrete type buildings with bars on the windows and stuff. That's the way you need to think about self-custody out there too. Anyway,
sorry, I didn't answer. But I think it is possible to do. Absolutely, it is possible to do, and it's great in every way. But I think each individual watching should really think through, like, am I the person who keep losing my passwords? I need to contact support, or I have some issue with my computer and I don't know what is happening or what I did exactly. Okay, then maybe self-custody isn't for you. Then an ETF is probably a safer solution.
What I've been seeing lately is a big move. I mean, I do it personally with some of my keys. Is go put in a safety deposit box at a bank. So I find it quite ironic that crypto is making banks redundant, yet the new business use case for banks is safety deposit boxes. So you can see a whole bunch of safety deposit boxes with the keys written down in them. That's all the bank is. So I do that. I just wrote the keys down and went and put in a safety deposit box. And to get it, I need to go and actually prove humanness at the bank. So that's a solution. There you go.
Good stuff.
$15 a year. It's $15.
We have some weird things cooking, and I think when you get into Bitcoin, you automatically become let's say, a little bit paranoid about everything, but we have a couple of things happening in the world today. First of all, Brian Armstrong was quite upset that in the UK, we're talking about the UK again, all of a sudden, it's like a UK show this week. But their Bitcoin ad got banned in the UK by TV networks. And a lot of people aren't really sure why. There's a lot of weird stuff going on in the UK. We'll talk about that in a second. And then this lady, Christine Lagarde, is planning to implement a central bank digital currency by October. We're talking 12 weeks away, okay? And that will influence how anybody spends money, manages money. Are they being good citizens? We've seen the canary in the mine of exactly what can be done in China with central bank digital currencies. It's been her 5.5-year plan to get this thing done. Now they are close to the finish line. Is this a concern for people? I know me, I think I always talk about what California tried to do to its citizens back during C-19, and they tried to mandate everybody to get what. If they turned off your money, we're going to turn off your money unless you get this or whatever. Am I being a little bit too tinfoil hatty, or is this a real concern? First of all, to you, Mando, UK banning Bitcoin ads from Coinbase, shocking or expected?
No, I think that's kind of expected, if I'm honest. Like, they've come out very, very hard on a number of different on crypto media. So if you're an influencer in the UK, or you're advertising meme coins or leverage trading or exchanges in general, they have like a really stringent set of guidelines around that. So actually being involved from the UK in crypto, in terms of being a content creator or being involved in advertising, is actually very difficult. It's actually why a number of the exchanges actually pulled out as well. Coinbase has stayed, but I think this is gonna continue to happen. I don't think it's like banning Bitcoin, but like advertisement of crypto is going to be treated very similar to advertising of things like spread betting or other more like quasi financial betting platforms. So it's going to be.
But tough. I remember stories 20 years ago. The cable companies, I don't know what they're called, but if you're watching TV at home and there's a horse race, you were able to bet on the horse race, and they would just bill your cable account to your house. And I know somebody. Yeah, I know somebody who lost £4,000 betting on horses, and the wife got the bill in the mail the next month, and she was like shocked.
Really?
True story.
Yeah, look, I think advertising, or like, I think cryptos may be even more stringently regulated than some of the sports betting stuff in the UK. But aside from that, in terms of the CBDC thing, this has been the weirdest thing about the Europe. Like, the euro is so obsessed with the idea that crypto is going to replace the euro. And they haven't really embraced euro stablecoins in the same way that the US has. Which is kind of strange as well, because it's not like there's a lot of like, I don't know, divergence between the views of different countries in the euro. So the idea that they want to have some sort of one CBDC, I think it's just it'll open up a can of worms. Like, I think they should embrace these independent stablecoin companies in the same way the US has. They can maybe control them that way, but like, the fact that Lagarde thinks that CBDC is going to save the euro just seems laughable to me. Like, seems like really ridiculous.
Yeah. So CTO, you come from Europe. You've been watching this like I have very closely for many years. How alarming is this?
I think it's not so alarming, because these bureaucrats have forgotten one thing. And that is that there is no value for the user. There's no customer value. There's no value for anybody with the CBDC. So who's going to use it? That they have forgotten about. They just think that they're going to create this and then it's going to take over everything. But I don't think so, because I can't identify the business case. Like, the business case of stablecoin on a public ledger is enormous. We don't need to reiterate that, but it has basically taken over so much of financial activity because it's highly useful. But if you don't have that, you can as well use any of the payment apps that's already existing. It doesn't bring any additional advantage to anybody. So I don't think anyone's going to use it, and they just haven't thought about that because none of them have ever done any business activity in their entire life. So they forgot about the customer.
Yeah, but the problem is they were limiting cash amounts, cash payments, transfer payments, digital payments, and that in turn will force people to use the CBDC. Correct? Like if you got to transfer
I don't think so,
$1,000 to a
because
partner.
most people are not using. I think I saw some statistic in Sweden, for example, my home country of birth. 98.7% or something like that of payments are already digital. So the remaining, 1% is maybe it's like old people who don't have a phone, something like that. They are not going to use the CBDC. So I think that the use case just isn't there. There's no benefit for anyone. So I'm not so worried about it. I think it will fail miserably, the CBDC Euro experiment. I think they will decommission it in the end.
I think you're being very optimistic. I think they will mandate it and will force it. Marty, what do you think of central bank digital currencies? I call them Orwellian spy coins. Are you a fan?
I mean, regulatory capture is definitely part of the agenda for any bureaucratic or authoritarian government. They've never liked crypto because it takes away their power. But as I always tell people, the number one sort of use case of crypto is anti-establishment. So any pushback by any regulatory body or government simply plays into the major use case of crypto. So all this does is make people want Bitcoin more, in my opinion, because it's making the threat real. I think CBDC is very hard to implement. Like CTO says, the incentives are very low. I think that if there's any other option, they'll win. I think you haven't even seen the beginning of the re-dollarization across the world through the US stablecoins. We've just had the Genius Act for a couple of weeks. I think Donald Trump is going to push the digital dollar throughout the world like you've never seen, and it's going to go throughout Europe as well as an option. So in my opinion, I don't think it's going to work. This reminds me of Maxine Waters, right? Maxine Waters had the same narrative in the US Senate when she took down Facebook Libra project. That was the first time we ever saw sort of a representative in the government come at crypto so hard. So it reminds me of that. It just feels like it's a couple of years behind. I think it's going to reach the same conclusion. You can't beat these technologies. You can try and, sugarcoat them. You can try and change them. You can try and own them. But at the end of the day, I think people want decentralized money. And if they have that option, they'll use it. But to your point, I think within the government sector, I think they might use a CBDC. And they'll try and push it through banking and capital controls and financial repression in the EU, because we all know the EU is in trouble financially. And this is usually what countries do when they're in financial trouble, is do capital controls, lower the amount of money you're allowed to access every day. They're loaning you money, guys. There is no money. Yeah. So I think this is all just part of that, quite lagged, and absolutely Europe is in the worst case. Go ahead.
And end stage fourth turning stuff. I hope not, but we have to be paranoid. And then we have a new Metaplanet in Japan. This company is called Convano, which, believe it or not, they run apparently nail salons across Japan, and they're trying to buy 21,000 Bitcoin. I mean, the for some reason, like a lot of these things are popping up in Japan because the yen is swirling around the toilet and it's about to be flushed, and that's why these Japanese companies are desperate to move to Bitcoin. And same with companies across Sweden and the Middle East and Canada and everywhere else. These treasuries are insane, everybody. Marty, back to you. What do you think of another Metaplanet out of Japan?
Yeah, I mean, Metaplanet, we've seen this last few weeks, they're getting very aggressive. They're buying, thousands of Bitcoin at a time now. But this Convano is interesting. They've even got a really nice website. You can go to convano.com and look at the analytics. They've got a beautiful dashboard. They have 165 Bitcoin, and their goal is 21,000. Just another Jack Mallers type 21,000 branding. But they've got a nice graph here showing each person. They're just basically copying the Sailor Tracker. Yeah, it's legitimate. I haven't yet seen any kind of filing on the SEC for this. So they haven't, moved over and registered in the US yet in any way. But on the Japanese market, they're trading live. I'd like to see them come over and trade on the US market as well. But here we go. We've got another one. This is just added to the list.
Yeah. That's super interesting. And then we had one of the most mind-blowing earnings calls I've ever listened to, and I listen to a lot of earnings calls. This is from MicroStrategy, and to you, Mando, because you know how debt markets, credit markets, bond markets work very well. During the earnings call, Saylor said he is no longer going to ATM MicroStrategy equity unless the NAV premium is greater than 2.5. It's currently about 1.55 as we speak. MicroStrategy is up about, I don't know, $15 today on this, but he explicitly stated he will not use the at-the-market ATM for his stock. And I think he's saying that because there's so much demand for the STRC, which is their new money market that pays 9% versus your 3 or 4% you even get in traditional money markets. Now, when I look at this, this is a great chart. I can't remember who put it together, but it siphons off money from traditional markets, and the Bitcoin market cap is tiny, 2 trillion compared to these. You add these together, it's $550 trillion of what they can siphon away between the equity market, the bond market, the money market funds. Do you believe MicroStrategy can sustain themselves by just selling their newfangled version of a money market account?
I mean, I think this is really good news for the common stock that he was going to do that. Because I do think that although it's non-cumulative dividends, like paying prefs 9 to 10% a year, if you're going to continue to do that to fund your Bitcoin purchases, it can have an impact on the common stock. So I think this is a good scenario for the common. I continue to have the controversial view that I don't really know what benefits you of him buying more Bitcoin. I kind of feel like this vehicle is well financed, and I don't really know if there's going to create more equity value by buying more Bitcoin, because it's on a per share basis. You're probably going to get the same than if it was right now. So I'm of the view that Saylor's absolutely hit a screamer, but I don't want him maxing out 9% interest to buy more. It's better. This vehicle of pref shares is better than converts, which he was using before. But even then, I kind of like Saylor's position. I wouldn't do anything right now. I think what scares me is that he stretches to buy 50 billion more, and has to kind of do it in a way that can trip him up.
Yeah, but he is very, very well aware of risk. Good thing he's been through the previous cycle, and I think
he's a smart guy.
He said the price of Bitcoin has to fall below $20,000 before he even breaks a sweat. And even if that happens, they can still pay off their debt for the 10 years after that level. So he is covered on both sides. But I find this completely fascinating. Marty, do you watch the Infinite Money Glitch at all? Is it of interest to you?
No, it is. No, I think it's great. I think the biggest misunderstanding is all of the different offerings from MicroStrategy and how they tailor-made for each particular kind of industry and investment type. From dividend bearing to fixed income to low volatility. I mean, each one has a specific use case. So it's not just random. The guy's literally only begun. He's building a new yield curve. Does that make sense to you? I believe he's making a new yield curve on top of Bitcoin, and ultimately Bitcoin bonds. If you look at what he's doing, I believe that's his strategy. So I think the strategy is bigger than you realize. And as long as his liquidation prices are down there in the 20s, I think it will be safe forever. I don't see a problem with that. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's funny because going back and reflecting on 2020 and 2021, one of the things I was hoping for was a Bitcoin-backed stablecoin with yield.
He could do that.
Well, that's what he's doing. That's what he's basically doing, almost with a different type of flavor. But why didn't this solution come from Bitcoin itself? That's kind of a little bit interesting. CTO, any thoughts on that? The answer was there. The need is there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what Bitcoin is lacking. Though, if you're looking for something that is lacking, it's the yield, right? If we look for criticism or what could serious investors say, they could say that, but it's not an asset because it doesn't bring any yield as opposed to equities. So, I mean, I would have liked that also. I would like some yield solution to Bitcoin. I would love that, in fact. and that proposition has also worked very well as a narrative. Like many of the altcoins have had that proposition, then they've had a lot of other problems, maybe which Bitcoin doesn't have. Imagine if we could get some solution where you could get a very high confidence yield, right? I think a lot of us are very wary about high yields in crypto. Like the moment someone is paying you high yields, high APY, and so on, there is some enormous risk somewhere baked in. And often it's not a favorable equation at the end of the day. Like the risk you're taking is bigger than the yield you get.
Yep.
But Bitcoin is unique here in this perspective. So if you could really create this something that seems very stable, maybe more stable than government bonds at this point of the world, with fiat, facing really issues, fiat could go into collapse. It could go into astronomical inflation numbers at the end of the day, like accelerating inflation, hyperinflation. And I think a lot of people would prefer a Bitcoin-based yield instead of government-based yield if given the chance. So if we could really crack that, I think that opens an enormous amount of money, actually.
Yeah, and there is so much downside protection with his vehicles that are there. But I think what really was the wake-up call for Michael Saylor is when he wanted to list $500 million worth of this STRC, and he was oversubscribed by 5.2x. So the demand is insatiable. And this demand, people are wondering who's buying this stuff. Well, it's insurance companies, it's banks, it's companies that need treasury return, that yield you're talking about.
Exactly. So, I forgot to say one very important thing. Like what is different here than in all other situations is that the volumes that they are buying actually affects the price. It moves the price.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's a little bit of if he can keep the volumes large enough, even if it doesn't give any benefit as such, he will probably drive up the price of Bitcoin because it's enough billions to actually do that. And I'm sure he's very aware of that also.
Oh, yeah. And in fact, their bag, I think at the beginning of 2024 was like 400,000. Now it's 630,000. They've added 230,000 Bitcoin in 18 months, which is a lot of Bitcoin. And it's going to be hard. He knows he just needs to front run everybody. But speaking of yield and yield bearing assets, some crypto stats here, just calling out a few things. There's one name that keeps on growing faster and faster. There has been some technology stuff, and I don't want to be shot for talking about this name, but I'll ignore the green line. But the green line does now do 77 times more transactions than ETH. 77 times. It does 4,000 times more transactions than Cardano. Okay. Now, and Base is now doing pretty much everything on ETH, but yet it's a private chain with one central validator. It's pretty crazy. But on top of all that, we'd also have more treasury. Well, we have more manipulation. And this is what everybody wants to hear from you, Marty, again. We touched on it briefly at the beginning, but it's clearly egregious. I want you to tell the audience that they do not hold any Solana reserves, but they're shipping 110,000 Solana to Wintermute to manipulate the price. How illegal is this?
The problem is that it's actually not illegal. None of this is illegal. I mean, that is the race to regulate, right? That is why there's so much energy to regulate in the USA. Is I believe that they're aware of this. And it's not illegal. Remember, this is outside of the jurisdiction, and crypto is a globally fungible commodity. So they can do it. They're not under any obligation not to do it. The problem is, are they trading with customer funds? And that has now become a subject discussed by not only me, but OKX's partners. I mean, other centralized exchanges are asking the question. It's starting to smell a little bit like a Sam Bankman-Fried thing. Like, are they doing all the same things they accused Sam Bankman-Fried of doing in order to suppress and manipulate using customer funds? So that's the question. But remember, there are a couple of caveats. They only produce their proof of reserves on a website, Binance, on the 1st of every month. So we know that as of July 1st of the month, which is now already a month away, we should get the August numbers coming out probably today or tomorrow. CZ says usually around the 6th of the month. They had 0 ETH and 0 SOL. All of the ETH and SOL they had was customer funds. In other words, 100% back. ETH exactly 100% back. That's 5 million ETH. And SOL 100.03. So, very close to none. So where are they getting these assets they're sending to Wintermute? Wintermute will defend themselves, but at the end of the day, they are sending assets to Wintermute. We can see it on chain. What are these assets? If they don't have these assets, where are they getting them? Do they have private stashes? Are they off-books proof of reserves? What's going on? So there's a lot of questions. And I think that the Clarity and Market Structure Act will include verbiage and will introduce surveillance so that this can't happen anymore as regulated brokers. Binance is a regulated broker now in the US and in other jurisdictions. They've tried to go offshore as much as possible, but it's clamping in. And everyone always asks me, how are they going to stop this? Well, using regulatory collusion. They're going to slowly, reduce the area in which Binance can operate illegally, until which point that they'll have to surveil and register their interactions with market makers. But as of right now, 100% Binance and Coinbase are manipulating the markets to support their futures perpetual markets. 100%.
Exactly. And everybody remember, when you are trading in perps, you got to know who you're up against. So you need to be aware of this before you go into a position and make sure you don't get liquidated. And in fact, when things capitulate and hit a bottom, that's when you perp hard and get in. But we also saw something very big. Thank you for that, Marty. Very big happening on the CME futures. A massive 252% surge, trading volume up to 8.1 billion in July, a new all-time high, record activity. What this typically means, Mando, is institutions are positioning themselves for gains, and that's probably because 8 SOL ETFs are coming in addition. How would you interpret this explosion in CME volume for Solana?
Yeah, I mean, you saw, was it Invesco filed for a Solana perp ETF last week? I think we're really just waiting on BlackRock for this. I think Solana is going to have a really good Q4 probably, and maybe start of next year. I think what's happening in ETH right now is going to happen to Solana, basically.
Hold on a second.
As in, like,
you're saying start of next year. You expect the bull run to go into 2026. I want to put a line under that.
I don't believe in the 4 year cycle. So yeah, I think we're now in this sort of shallower cycles. Let me put it that way, which match far more of the stock market. And my general here is that Solana is going to set itself up for any widespread ETFs. Hopefully, BlackRock files. Then you start to see inflows, hopefully, and then you start to see the treasury companies really pile in. We have a few in Solana, but not now at the same scale as we have in ETH. And all that is just TradFi getting behind it. And I think that story takes a little bit more time for we would call it slower money, like institutional money, wealth managers to kind of get on board. And then that's when you get the FOMO from the treasury companies happening as well. So I think Solana is the clear favorite to do a similar sort of run over any of the altcoins, potentially only really hyper liquid. But Solana's the clear one. But I think it might take a little bit of time.
It's interesting you say that about the treasury companies, that they're going to come in later, because they're already quite active right now. DFDV just bought the dip, another 110,000 SOL. I think they're up to about 1.3 million. You got UPEXI, 1.9 million. Marty, I know you track these puppies too. And then another new one just popped in as well. And by the way, when you look at the pace of the treasury companies and where they're hitting and the amount that they are buying, you got a couple of zombie companies, like completely dead companies that are jumping into hype treasuries. I like hype. I don't like the treasury companies, but some of these companies are kind of interesting. Marty, what's your take on SOL Treasuries versus what Mando said? Mando, I love what you said. The piece is, I think the SOL Treasuries are already front running the big stuff that's coming in Q4 or even early 2026. Marty.
Yeah, I mean, the big news last week, actually, if you look at a regulatory side, is the SEC acknowledging CBOEs filing for a generic spot ETF structure for commodity-based shares. Now, this is a huge news because it basically green lights any crypto project from creating an ETF now or applying for an ETF, and that's across all exchanges. That was the big news. So I think it's all opening up the door for the approval of the Solana ETFs. There's now 8 of them. They're all in kind, which is huge, and they all include staking. There's now also 3 futures ETFs. There's 2 running live, and as Mando says, Invesco filed for a 3rd one. So there's definitely a lot of momentum behind Solana at the institutional level, as well as SUI. SUI just picked up a treasury company, Mill City Ventures, with support from the SUI Foundation, a $500 million investment. That's the biggest one we've seen for SUI. So this is a recurring theme. I think leading into 2026, we're going to see more crypto ETFs than you can imagine across all spectrums. I think they're going to approve them all at once. It's going to be a massive big inflow into TradFi. So that CBOE filing approval by the SEC, I think, was the biggest news last week in the regulatory environment. A lot of people didn't see. As far as Solana goes, they released the Seeker phone is getting shipped today, August 4th. That's 150,000 units. And I think that's going to create another frenzy for Solana. They're upgrading to Firedancer. There's now 10% of the stake running on Firedancer. It's clicking on all cylinders. I think you ain't seen nothing yet when it comes to Solana. It's clearly being suppressed for institutional accumulation. And as I said, Binance has slowly moved up the ranks. They were the number 7 validator at the beginning of the year. They're now the number 1 validator. Now, you got to ask the question, why does Binance want to be the number 1 validator for Solana and the number 1 validator for SUI? Because they believe in it. I mean, I think they want a piece of the action, right? And so, I think Solana is going to feature heavily in stablecoin economy. It's going to feature heavily in TradFi stocks, X stocks, internet capital markets, and it's the only one that has a dedicated physical internet being built for it for high-speed blockchain transactions with 0.00. Everyone else is behind because they haven't even come close to 1500 TPS. So once you hit 1500 TPS, you hit the scaling limits of the public internet, and you have to have a solution for that. Now, XRP doesn't have a solution. Ethereum doesn't have a solution. Not even Base sequences have a solution because they don't get close. They don't even get near 100 transactions per second. So I think Solana has a huge fundamental head start. As far as the price goes, it's always been very decoupled from the fundamentals, but that's about to change. I think Binance has now turned the corner. I think regulatory will come down on them with regards to their manipulation. They can't suppress and accumulate anymore. And I think it's just going to be balls to the wall, treasury companies all the way. And just one second, DTO mentioned you want yield with Bitcoin. Guys, there's already projects on both SUI and Solana to bring Bitcoin liquidity onto those networks and allow you to generate yield. I'm generating 0.07% a day in a ZBTC USDC pool now on Meteora. That's 25% a year. Okay, that's stable coin. It's Bitcoin with stable coin, very low volatility. It's already happening, and you have ICA on SUI doing the same thing with MPC technology. It's going to happen. There are going to be institutional versions of it. We've got a Bitcoin DEX coming out, Bitcoin yield products coming out. It's happening. The teams are building. It's just a matter of time. So there will be solutions for Bitcoin yield on these other execution networks.
And before we go to CTO, I just want to remind everybody why we talk about Solana is because it's running away with all the activity, all the users, all the transactions in crypto. CTO, what do you think of all of this?
Yeah, so to add one perspective, because I've been in this situation many times, like you identify something, like there's all this volume, all this activity. So why is price not going up? And previously, I often made the wrong conclusion. I felt that, okay, maybe I didn't get it. Maybe others understood it better, and I kind of gave up. While actually, I was just too early. I just saw it too early, and not enough other people saw it yet. So price didn't go up because they didn't buy it. And later, much later, after I had given up, price went up. So I've learned that lesson that sometimes you just have to wait longer. You identify this and it feels like nothing happens. You feel like giving up, but at least for me, that was usually the wrong thing to do. It's better to just wait and see if you can identify. So if I can show 2 charts here, because we talked about something else for a long time before anything happened. Here's ETH. We sat there, Mando, you brought this point up quite long before anything moved and said that, institutions should, might pick up ETH and so on. And then it actually happened. And it was pretty easy to identify. If you look at this picture here, everyone watching, it was not that difficult to identify when it happened, when they turned around. You don't need really any special knowledge or anything to see that this has turned around in the other direction. because suddenly that happened. Institutions, they started buying. They had heard about that something more than Bitcoin, and it was Ethereum is the second biggest, and that's all they knew. So they went and bought the second biggest coin, the one that you can program on something. That's all there is to it, and price goes up. Then I am sure that the same thing is going to happen here. Like at one point, this chart here, this is SOL BTC, it was very clearly turned in the other direction. And I don't think any one of us here or anyone else is going to miss it. I don't think there's any risk to miss it when it starts going the other way. And then we had in your bullet points, James, you said, is $1,000 SOL even possible? I don't deal in predictions, but I like possibilities. I think scenarios is a very powerful tool. It kind of opens your mind to think what is possible. So if I can just have 1 more minute to zoom out a little bit on this chart and answer that question, because from today's prices in SOL to BTC, if we just go to all-time high, that's like 3x from here. It's plus 200%, which is 3x. So 3x versus Bitcoin. And then could Bitcoin double in price? Yeah, probably. So that makes it 6x then. 3 times 2 is 6. So
to translate that into dollars, that's $500 or $1,000.
So $165 times 6 is $990. So $1,000, is it possible? Yes, of course it's possible. Actually, SOL to BTC just has to get back to previous levels where it's already been. And if Bitcoin doubles, okay, then we have 6x. That is $1,000. So I'm not predicting this. I don't know what will happen in the future, but it's good to understand possibilities. Is something possible? And yeah, definitely it's possible. And in that case, it will trend up for an extended period of time. And I don't think we're going to miss it, guys.
I like my whole thing. I love your predictions versus possibilities. I like to do expected values and allocate probabilities to actual amounts, which is cool. So I love that. I love that take. And we're going to wrap up. We're at 52 minutes. We try to keep this to an hour. We have this rapid fire round that we hinted on. There's a guy called Mert from one of the Solana developers, and he keeps talking about Solana being $1,000. Like it tweets every day. Mando, you see that? You follow Mert at all? He's like totally
I definitely follow Mert. I definitely follow Mert. He's like Solana OG, right?
Yeah. But he keeps saying $1,000, $1,000. I think, I like your perspective, but I think it's unlikely. If we get to 350, 500, that would be incredible. But we'll see. We don't know. And then, Marty, you did mention the Seeker phone is shipping right now. What will this ship with? Does anybody know? Because there was NFTs and there was Bonk. People made a fortune on that last time around.
They've created a dedicated token for Solana Mobile. It's called SKR. It's on SOL. It's already trading. I actually bought very low, done very well on it already. So we'll see how that does. SKR. But a lot of airdrops. So expect a lot of airdrops to the phone. But a lot of apps. I'm hearing there's a lot of dedicated new apps for social networking and things like that with the Solana phone ecosystem. Very exciting news. With regard to Solana 1000, I think we run to 300 to 400, but then they finally pass a lowered inflation change to the economics, which we all know they want. And now Galaxy has actually written one up, which I think is going to get all the support it needs. Remember, this is very, very highly decentralized, so they need 2/3 of a governance vote, not a 50% vote. They need at least 2/3, in which they missed out by a few votes for the previous attempt to lower inflation and make it more aligned with the market. I think that'll happen. When that does happen, I think SOL will go upwards into the 700s, 800 region very fast.
Wow.
That's the only reason there's a lot of selling pressure on Solana. It's just every time there's any inflation, typically it gets sold for profit by the validators. So that to me is a big highlight that'll happen. That change. But overall, I think if you look at fundamentals, I'm a big fundamental guy. I'm seeking fundamentals. In stock, we have fundamentals. If you look at the fundamentals of what's going on, if you just divorce yourself from the charts, Solana right now has 70% of all blockchain transactions. There we go. So that's all I really look at. Is that going up or is that going down? Base has made, we've all been very aware on social media, Base has made a massive marketing strategy over the last weeks for their Base app and their Base swaps and their Base launch pads, and props to them. They're doing a good job. Jesse's doing a good job, a lot of energy. But I just want to inform people, you can go grok yourself. Base is not a blockchain. Stop saying that. It's not a chain. Base is a sequencer network. It's centralized. It's not open source. In my opinion, it's not any different from the Coinbase app. It's an Ethereum-based ecosystem. They roll up transactions and write them to Ethereum, and then there's a 7-day escrow on Ethereum for Ethereum validators to dispute any of those rolled up transactions. So anything happening on Base is in a 7-day escrow, and that'll become very clear when they get to market structure and start to pass laws about this, and they'll have to disclose their securities. So I'm not that threatened by Base at all. I don't think their transactions very account for it for much. I still look at Ethereum as the L1. It's running at 14 to 15 TPS right now. Their product timeline to improve the settlement time and scalability of Ethereum runs to 2028, according to Vitalik. I'm very much a part of that now. I've got to know that timeline very clearly so that I can argue the points with maximum education. And it looks like they have a plan for 2028. By that time, they will have rolled out a new Ethereum L1 version. They will fork the current version, and it will be, equatable to a Cardano type speed and scalability metric, which is, if you all remember, Vitalik, Charles Hoskinson, and all of the guys from Cosmos, they were all part of the original sort of cypherpunk computer club that came up with EVM, the architecture, and they all had great ideas for improving it. And Charles improved Cardano, and I think Vitalik's going to make the same. Evan Bachman proposed improvements to Ethereum and introduce a better architecture for scalability and speed, but it's around 2028. So I become an Ethereum bull along that timeline. As they make those improvements, I will get on board. But until then, I'm not a big believer in L2, and you know that, and I'll stand by it. I don't believe. I think Layer 2s were invented to solve a problem that inherently should have been fixed in L1. And at the end of the day, these are securities. They're derivatives. Everything on an L2 is a derivative, not sufficiently decentralized. There you go.
So I think what Ethereum does by 2028 will be too little too late, because by that time, Solana will be churning along at over 1 million TPS. But that's just my point of view. The roadmap is already there. It's just about to be implemented. Mando, question for you in the quick fire round. A lot of people are very concerned about being ravaged by inflation. You hear people saying, oh, car insurance is through the roof, and food is through the roof, and medical insurance, and everything is getting very expensive. What do you believe is your hurdle rate to cover just so you can tread water in the ocean? I believe it's like 12 to 14%. Some people believe 8 to 10%. And with the pace of global money printing right now, what would you peg it at? And is it going to get worse over time?
Yeah, I think I saw something crazy today. Like the dollar has lost like 75% of its purchasing power over the last 2 decades. Something insane.
Yeah.
I would say double digits. Like if you're going to be investing in things, you've got to have the perception that you want to be getting 15% plus, in my opinion. Which I think it then becomes kind of reductive. You only get involved in a few different things, of which crypto, AI, robotics, obviously are up there. I think you have to have that as a return profile. I don't think you should have all of your money invested at all times. Though. I've said this so many times. Like, I think there is always a time, even in crypto, like once a week, once a month, where everything is red. It's down a lot, and you just wish you had money to buy. But it's always good to have a amount of money to buy pretty bad dips, because it's just like volatility is the product for crypto to a large extent. So you got to know how to trade that yourself.
Like what we kicked off at the very beginning. There are sometimes deals that you have to be ready for, like $75,000 Bitcoin a few weeks ago. That was a screaming deal, and then it goes back to 123 grand.
I obviously have like a take which is slightly different to this. I still think the best trade at the moment is ETH. Like I know we spoke about before fundamental versus technical trades, and it's a technical trade rather than a fundamental trade. I just think TradFi's coming in and buying it. And I wouldn't fade that. I think it's going to continue.
Tom Lee lit that fuse in a big way. For the first time ever in the history of the ETH ETF, it actually matched the Bitcoin flows over the last month.
Which
So
is
the amount of
crazy.
money coming in is bonkers. Yeah, when it was like dead for a year plus, and then all of a sudden, in the space of a month, it went on fire. So, well done for pegging that one. That was a great call. But there are some changes
Solana will have
happening.
that trade. I think Solana will have that trade. Like I said, I just think that right now, and I do this as a trade. Like trader, you look at two things. You look at fundamentals, like what's got the fastest chain, like what's the best for payments, and then you look at the technicals of a trade, like who's the buyer. And if you get the technicals of a trade wrong, you can be stuck in like a good fundamental trade for a long time, of what your perception of a long time would be. Let me put it that way. So right now, I feel like ETH is maybe not the best fundamental trade, but it's got the technicals behind it, and that feels like a good short-term trade. So I think it's going to outperform Bitcoin here for a little bit.
And this dovetails nicely. And I love what you said by 15%, because if anybody watches my channel, 14% is my hurdle rate where you're not treading water. If you're not making 14% on your portfolio, you're probably drowning over time. CTO, this takes us to a related concept, not just the hurdle rate of 14%, but people are beginning to consider, should I stake my USDC and get 4 or 5%? Or should I stake my SOL and maybe more risk, more return? How do you play this, or what would you tell the audience? Although you don't tell them anything about financial advice, but interesting debate. Last question.
Yeah, I mean, staking in crypto generally hasn't been a good risk reward, in my opinion. Like the yield you get versus the risk you take has many times turned out catastrophic. Like I feel like Mando said, if you invest in anything with any kind of risk, you have to have like at least 15%. And if you invest in something risky, you need much more than that. If you invest in anything that can realistically go wrong next year, you need maybe 20-30% out. So I'm not interested in staking anything that gives like 4 or 5%. That's my take on that. Then should you like leverage trade and stake stocks to buy more Bitcoin or something like that? Of course, it's for advanced investors, and it's very difficult to give generic advice, I think.
Yeah.
For that.
But what's very interesting though, because I did a video years ago, and basically, if you're buying, say, Solana at $8 and you stake it, and you're getting 8% return per year, and the price of Solana goes to $250, your actual returns on the base cost are really high. We're talking hundreds of percent. So staking can work out very, very well when you look at it from that perspective. But that's a separate issue altogether. We are above the hour. I know it's very late your time, CTO, and it's late evening, Mando, your time. Any final thoughts for the week? We went down a bit of a different path this week, talking about kind of hurdle rates and central bank digital currencies and crazy stuff. The big takeaways I got from this today, as CTO always says, he always learns something, is Mando thinks bull run is running into 2026.
I heard that too. I heard that.
Marty said 125K in 10 days for Bitcoin. I heard that too. And a lot of other good stuff. And also technical trade versus fundamentals. Very, very valid point there as well for Mando. And glad to hear as well that ETH and Cardano are going to make it. That wasn't on my bingo card. So
Never said Cardano. I never said Cardano.
Yeah, it's mad.
I have one final. If we have like final takes, I'm in Vietnam here in Asia, and every time I come to Asia, I just get amazed and reminded that the world is actually changing. When living in legacy countries, if I call it like that,
Correct.
1 year, 2 years, 10 years, 20 years, nothing really changes, and you start feeling that the world can't change. But then you come to a place like here. And it's, Hanoi is 2 years since I was here, and everything has changed. Like they built the best mall I've ever seen. They built it. There was nothing there 2 years ago. They've decided, okay, only electric motorcycles and cars in the city center. Boom, decide, implement in whatever, some months. Everyone have to scrap the gasoline motorcycles and get electric ones. Boom, fix the pollution issue. Everything is changing, and it's changing so fast. So when we're in this space where we're always sitting here talking about change, can the financial markets actually change? Can this happen? And sometimes when sitting in like a legacy environment, start feeling it's never going to happen, because how can the legacy that has been so entrenched ever changed? But then you come here, you breathe some fresh, polluted air full of change, and you feel like, oh, wow, yeah, it can actually change. These things that we're sitting talking about here, it can actually happen. The financial system can change. The, Solana, Ethereum, blockchains that aren't even invented yet can truly change the whole financial system. It can actually happen, guys. That's my take on this. Love coming to Asia and be reminded of change.
Last time I did a trip was Singapore, and everybody is living on their mobile device. Everything is paying, ordering, scheduling, cars, taxis, everything is digital. And I was in a store the other day, and there was a lady fumbling through a whole bunch of dollar bills and pennies and coins trying to pay for something. I was like, wow, I haven't seen that in a while. But yeah, the world is changing, but you're right. The West is very stagnant, and it doesn't evolve very fast. Marty, final thoughts from you. Thank you for that great input.
Yeah, I don't get too much caught up in the noise. I think just on a high time frame, follow global liquidity. It's all available, readily available on TradingView for anybody out there to follow. Right now, the correlation is almost exact. I mean, according to my numbers, every 1% increase in global liquidity equates to roughly 7 to 8% increase in Bitcoin's price. And obviously, all other assets are correlated to Bitcoin. So at the end of the day, follow global liquidity. It called this little correction, this 50% pull down from the June move, almost exactly. And its next move is, to the date, I can tell you right now, because it's 12-week lag, around September 23rd, we'll be at 140,000. Then we'll do a reaccumulation there, probably through into the new year. There will be a pullback, probably to around 125, like I said, 125 to 130. Then a longer reaccumulation, kind of like we had early on in 2024. So around June or July of 2026, which will be the next markup, probably to the 160 range and higher. So in my opinion, that's the high time frame. On the low time frame, just follow the liquidation levels. Understand Binance and Coinbase are running businesses. Their business relies on liquidating longs. There is no free lunch. Any leverage traders out there, high leverage, you're not going to win. It's impossible. So just give up, reduce your leverage. Nothing over 10% ever wins. So why are you trying? It's futile. It's like betting on a losing horse. It's just idiotic. You're giving your money over to these exchanges. The good part about it is, what are the exchanges doing with the liquidity? Probably buying Bitcoin. So it's an interesting thing. The other thing is Jack Mallers. Listen to Jack Mallers. Jack Mallers has been very vocal recently about his thesis for Bitcoin and stablecoin. Remember, stablecoin came along to Jack Mallers. It's like a dark, evil thing. He's now turning around and understanding that stablecoin is part of the strategy. And it appears as if the government, Wall Street, and the institutions are pumping Bitcoin with debt because they need to print the equivalent amount of treasuries to buy stablecoins. So they've created this sort of recycling perpetual machine to force debt and new issuance of treasury, short-term treasury T-bills into Bitcoin. And follow along with that too. I'm here every day on the space, and we listen to Jack Mallers a lot. And it seems like there was a monetary shift, the 1st of January 2024, monetary policy shift, part of the Scott Bessent Howard Lightning strategy to move dollar fiat debt into Bitcoin. And it's realized perfectly. So far, it's happening exactly according to global liquidity. And until that stops, that's my thesis. So I recommend everyone to follow along with that. But we'll see next Monday. I reckon it will be at 125.
Exactly. And then speaking of stablecoins, the growth in stablecoins has been exponential straight up. And that's a huge use case as well for much of crypto. Mando, final thoughts from you. Liquidity, stablecoins, ETH, crypto, markets. You mentioned robotics earlier. It's like the robotics is on your bingo card. What's your robotics play?
You've got it. Well, Tesla's obviously one of them. Look, I think we're going to have a strong September. I think that's when we kind of break out when we start to have rate cuts. I think we could chop here for a little bit again. Like I said, I'm still a bit more bullish ETH, but I think we're not going to head much lower with the current situation that we're in. Like, we're actually diverging quite a lot from that M2 money supply chart, so I expect it to catch up pretty aggressively next month. It's a quiet month for a lot of data though this month. There's not going to be a lot of data.
August is death. And then people come back and see what happened in August. And then the first week or two in September is always crap. And then we rally from there. So expect a bumpy 4 to 6 weeks. That's always the way. Unless this time is different. We're not sure. But I want to thank you all for coming, everybody. Big thank you to Mando and Marty and CTO. Links below for everybody's channels and newsletters and websites and all that good stuff. Marty does killer spaces. Mando's newsletters and essential read every day. And of course, CTO for a very high IQ perspective on everything crypto and era digitalis, which is coming for us all, everybody. Look forward to seeing you guys next Monday. Cheers.
Thanks for having our boys. See you next Monday at 1:25. If I'm wrong, I'll
thank you,
admit it.
mods, as well. Bye.
Have a good